described her as being pretty hard. When she was just a little bit older than one, her parents decided to try for another baby, and Kate McCann ended up getting pregnant with twins. So her mother ended up having a little baby boy named Sean, and a little baby girl named Emily. So that is the McCann family. Maddie was this absolutely beautiful little girl. She had blonde hair, and she actually had one green eye and one blue eye, which, side note, my sister has one green eye and one blue eye, and it's a trait must run in our family somewhere because I also have two aunts who have that, so I have never known anybody who had two different colors of eyes except my sister and my aunt, so anyway, I thought that was kind of cool. Anyway, Madeleine's eye color was not the only thing that made her eyes unique. She also had this brown spot on the iris of one of her eyes, her right eye, the green one. Madeleine's parents were both physicians. Her father worked full-time, but her mother just worked part-time so she could spend more time at home with the children. Her children were born so close together that it was a handful to have 3 children under the age of 3. In April of 2007, Madeleine and her family decide to go on vacation to Portugal. The McCanns would meet up with a group of, like, physician friends, so co-workers and people they had gone to medical school with. And this group would later be dubbed the Tappa 7. So, the McCanns and their doctor friends decide to take this vacation together, and all of the friends also brought their children along. This felt like the perfect balanced vacation because they had their children with them, so they could have family time, but they would still have like adult friends to hang out with as well. So the McCann family arrives in Praia de Luz, Portugal on April 28th for a 7-night vacation. They weren't staying at a resort, but the place they were staying was more like apartment complexes that was right next to a resort area, so there were a lot of restaurants and tennis lessons or just go to the pool and relax. The Ocean Club was one of several complexes in the village of Praia de Luz, and it was made up of apartments and small villas. There were several pools and tennis clubs as well. So the McCanns had planned this vacation with their coworkers. So the other people that were with them were Matthew Olsfield and his wife Rachel, David and Fiona Payne, Diane Webster, who was Fiona Payne's mother, Russell O'Brien and his partner, Jane Tanner. So most of this group had studied medicine together, and they were all friends, and a lot of them were still colleagues. There were a lot of children also brought to Portugal in this group, but most of the couple's children that were brought on this vacation were 3 years old or under. So we have this group of physicians and then a group of very small babies and toddlers that are accompanying their parents. So one of the reasons why the Ocean Club was chosen was because it was a very family-friendly resort. It operated something called a night crash, which was just like the daycare during the day, the kids club, but night crash was where you could bring your children and they were still supervised, and they would have movies on for them, and they could fall asleep there, and then when the parents got done going out to dinner or bars or whatever they were doing, they could go to this night crash later at night and pick up their children and then bring them home. So the McCanns and their friends decided that the night crash wasn't really for them. They did not utilize this service because they would have to put the kids to bed, and what if they fell asleep at the night crash too early and then they were up early the next morning, and then of course these kids would fall asleep because the parents wanted to be out till pretty late. Then they would have to go to the night crash and pick them up and wake them up and carry them home. So they decided that this just wasn't ideal for them. So early on in the vacation, the group of friends began putting their kids to bed in the evening in their apartments, and then they would go to this nearby restaurant called Tapas and have dinner. And what they would do, so they would all go to the restaurant, and then every 20 minutes or so they would go back to the apartments and check on their kids. This restaurant, so there is the apartments, and then there's a swimming pool, and then the restaurant is on the other side of the swimming pool. Thursday, May 3rd, was the family's 5th day there in Portugal. In the morning, they woke up and had breakfast, and while they were eating, Madeleine asked her parents why they hadn't come in and gotten her the night before when her and Sean were crying. And this question really threw the McCanns because series is going to have several videos, and I'm just going to interject it as we go along, and I hope that's not annoying, but first of all, I would never, ever, ever leave my children and, like, go somewhere, ever. Even, like, I don't like walking to get the mail when my kids are in the house when they were, like, little. So, if I had left the house and then found out while I was gone they had woken up in the middle of the night and had cried and been scared and I wasn't there, I would probably rethink the whole leave them and go to the restaurant situation. I wouldn't just be like, oh, we should come check on them more often. I would be like, we shouldn't leave them. But again, I would never leave my kids in the first place. So, after breakfast, around 10 a.m., the McCanns take their kids and drop them off at the kids' club, which was the daycare that they had been going to every single day while they had been in Portugal. At 12:30, they picked up their kids from the kids' club and brought them back to the apartment and had lunch. After lunch, they take their kids to the pool and just swim with them and have some family time. Then, around 2:30, the last photo of Madeleine McCann that we know of was taken of her, and she's just sitting by the pool next to her dad. At 3:30, Jerry and Kate take the kids back to the kids' club and drop them off, and then they go off and do their own thing. I think they had tennis lessons, or they were playing tennis. At 6 p.m., Kate picks up the kids and brings them back to the apartment to get ready for bed, while Jerry goes to a tennis lesson. Around 7:30, Jerry gets back, and they put the kids to bed. So on this particular day, the children had seemed even more tired than normal. And I know from taking my own children on vacation, they are just exhausted. And by day 3, day 4, day 5, it really starts catching up with the kids. So Kate said that Madeleine was so tired that as they were coming back from the daycare, she asked her mom to carry her because she didn't want to walk. Madeleine's mom read a book to the kids as they were in bed, and she said Madeleine was almost asleep before the book was even finished. Kate then went and had a glass of wine while she waited for Jerry to get ready. At 8:30, they left the apartment and they headed down to the tapas bar, which was on the other side of the pool from the apartment. They were the first ones from their group of friends to arrive that night. The tapas bar is where the McCanns and their friends would eat dinner, and all of these parents would leave their children alone, totally unattended, totally unsupervised, so they could go out and enjoy dinner with just the adults. None of these parents thought, and these are physicians, like, they're smart people, but none of them thought there was anything wrong with leaving all of the babies at home alone while they went to dinner. So they would just figure that they were tired from a busy day of vacation and they would sleep soundly. So they would go back every 20 to 30 minutes to check on the kids. Even though they were in a foreign country, they're leaving their kids all alone. And they were not even leaving them in a locked apartment. These apartments all had sliding glass doors, which were left unlocked so the parents could more easily come in and out of the apartments to check on the kids. So every night at 8:30, the McCanns and their friends had a standing reservation at Tapas, and they had a specific table that they always asked for. And the reason that they liked this certain table was because they could see the apartment building from where they were sitting. So they would tell the waiters, "We need this table because our kids are in the apartments and we just want to be able to keep an eye out on the complex." So there were a lot of people who knew that children were being left unattended in apartments. Like I said, they saw nothing wrong with that, so they had no problem talking about that out in the open. Anyone who worked at the restaurant, or anyone who even knew or talked to someone who worked in that restaurant, could have learned that children were being left alone, and the parents were going back to check on them like every 20 minutes. So if someone knew they were being left alone, it wouldn't be hard to watch what was happening every night and realize there was like a window of time when no one was checking on the kids. And if they wanted to do something, that would be their window. So I'm guessing that every night they went down and had dinner and then drank and drank and drank. And this went on for hours because if you're checking on them every 20 to 30 minutes, like they're saying it like they're doing it all night long instead of, well, twice while we were at dinner we went and checked on them. Does that make sense? Like, I typically would never stay at a restaurant for more than like an hour, but they're saying every 20 to 30 minutes, so that makes me think they were staying there for hours. Kate and Jerry McCann would later say that leaving the kids at the apartment and going to the bar to eat was the exact same thing as if your kids were asleep in your house and you were in the backyard. Jerry said this exact same thing in an interview, and he's like, it's no different than if a parent were downstairs with a toddler and then the parent went upstairs. So that is how they see leaving their children, like, no big deal. They felt like they were almost in the same house as them. But the bar was not certain table to keep an eye on the apartment complex when their actual apartment was on the other side. Anyway, Kate and Jerry continually try to minimize the distance between apartment 5A, where their babies were sleeping alone, and the tapas bar. Okay, so anyway, they get to the bar at 8:30 and they sit down and they order drinks. When Matthew Oldfield arrives, he tells the McCanns that everything was quiet from the outside when he passed by their apartment, making his way to tapas. At 8:55, Matthew Oldfield leaves the table to go check on his kids. At 9:05, Jerry goes to check on his kids. Now he enters the apartment through the unlocked sliding glass door and checks on his kids. And he says that all three of them were sleeping. He did say that as he approached their bedroom door, the door seemed open much more wide than he had left it, so they would put the kids in their bedroom and leave the door open like a crack so the light from the hallway could flood in. If they woke up, there would be light and they wouldn't be scared. So, as he approached the door, it was open much more wide, and he was like, oh, that seems like we don't leave it like that. But the kids were sleeping in their beds, and he said he actually went in, and I'm sure he's got a couple drinks in his system. He just kind of stood there and looked at his children and thought oh, these children are so beautiful and perfect, and I'm so lucky. This would be the last time he would ever see his daughter Madeleine again. On Jerry's way back to the bar, he sees a friend, so all of the adults in this area would come on vacation, and they would meet different people through tennis lessons, through sailing. So he meets this new friend that he's met while on vacation. He meets him in the road after he leaves to check on the kids. So the two kind of stop and chat a little bit. At 9:10, Jane Tanner says that she passed these two men on the road while she was going up to check on her kids. She remembers seeing them, but they do not remember seeing her, which is kind of weird, but it was dark and they could have just been wrapped up in their conversation and a little tipsy. So she passes them as she's walking on the street, and as she's walking up to the apartments, she notices someone crossing the street. A man was walking with a small child in his arms, a blonde child with pink pajamas. She remembers thinking, oh, that child doesn't have shoes or socks on. That's weird because it's pretty chilly now that it's nighttime, and I'm just surprised this parent didn't put shoes or socks on their child, which is ironic, as she has left her children completely alone to go down to the bar with her friends. It's just ironic that she's judging this other parent. But Anyway, she would later describe the man as being a Mediterranean-looking man. She said he wasn't a tourist. He wasn't, dressed like a tourist. And she really got the feeling that he was a local man. He was holding the child's body across his body. So, at 9:30, it is Kate's turn to get up and go check on the children. But both Matthew and Russell are getting up to go check on their kids. And Matthew tells Kate he can just check in on her kids while he's checking in on his kids right next door. And so she thanks him because now she doesn't have to go check on her kids. So Matthew claims that he went in the McCann's apartment and opened the door to the bedroom and looked in and saw Sean and Emily, but he doesn't remember seeing Madeleine. He just said he assumed she was there. So, at 10 p.m., Kate goes to check on her children. Kate goes in through the apartment door, which had been left unlocked. And again, she also notices that the bedroom they had left the children in, remember the door was usually open like this much. It's open much wider than they typically had it when they were gone. She says, as she walked closer to the door, she was about to reach out for the doorknob. She felt a wind from inside the room, she could feel it coming through the door, and it slammed the door shut. This really startled her because they had made sure there were no windows left open when they left the children to go down to the bar. So she opens the door and she knows she left the window closed, so as she opens the door, she looks right at the window, and it's open. And Madeleine's bed is empty, although Emily and Sean are fast asleep. So she doesn't look around. She doesn't think something's happened to Madeleine. Maybe I should, stay here with the two children that are left here safe and sound. Instead, she leaves the apartment, leaves the twins, and rushes back to the tapas bar, and she tells her friends Madeleine has been taken. This is really weird to me as a mother, because if I went into my child's room and they were not in their bed, my first thought would be they've wandered off. They're hiding, not they've been taken. But you will see right from the very beginning, they just insisted Madeleine had been taken. So, another thing that I want to point out here is that she claims that the wind slammed the door shut and it scared her. But the door slamming shut didn't seem to wake up the twins. They totally could just be heavy sleepers, but I'm just putting that out there. It is also very possible, we now know this didn't happen, but she didn't even look around the apartment for Madeleine. She just opens the door. She's not in the bed, leaves her children again to run to the she arrives at Tapas and begins screaming that Madeleine has been taken. Everyone is kind of like startled, and they jump up and begin looking for Maddie. They're calling her name, they're trying to figure out like where she could be, and they call police. It's kind of like this big deal, this big scene happening, and it's pretty late, so people just kind of start swarming to the area, and they're like, what's going on? What's going on? It was very evident something was up. So suddenly, people just begin running all around looking for Madeleine. There was a lot of commotion on the streets. Once the alarm had been rung that like there was a missing child, a missing baby. She's 3 years old. I feel like a 3-year-old is still a baby. This news just swept through the Oceanside resort like wildfire. Kate's sobs were heard echoing through the villas. One witness described hearing Kate cry, saying it was more like howling, like a very animalistic sound. So, at this point, Kate and Jerry are trying to look for Madeleine, and I'm sure they are in some sort of shock. So they begin making phone calls to family members back home to let them know. They are explaining the situation in a way that is very consistent from person to person. So they are telling family members that a window had been broken into, that it had been like jimmied, I think was the word they were using. They thought that Madeleine had been abducted through the window, which is weird because there was an open door. Like, it's weird to assume that somebody broke in through the window and then carried the child out through the window when there was like an open door. So I'll show you a picture of the window, but it's a type of window that would be like pretty difficult to break into through like the outside of it. The window wasn't damaged at all during the break-in. Police would later try to lift fingerprints off the window, but the only fingerprints that were found along the window and the windowsill belonged to Kate McCann. So, it's suspicious that the McCanns all told their family members how damaged the window was, when it was in fact not damaged. When these family members would later recount the story told to them by Jerry and Kate, every person was told the exact same story. So, I know when I tell a story, I tell all different versions because I'll accidentally leave a part out to this person or remember more information because this person asked a question that made me remember more of what happened. So it's a little suspicious that every single person got the exact same story. In my opinion, it's almost like these stories were practiced. The search for Madeleine was huge. So many people took part in it. Locals who had heard about a young girl going missing just showed up to help search. Several different police departments, even just random people who were there on vacation, is the next part of the video. I want to go over in depth the investigation